Welcome to Sapiens Sleep Stories. If you're here tonight, you're likely searching for rest, seeking to quiet the mind, and drift gently toward the sleep that feels just beyond reach. Tonight, we're exploring something remarkable, something that reveals the extraordinary intelligence of our direct ancestors. How Homo sapiens successfully hunted woolly mammoths, animals that stood 11 feet tall at the shoulder, weighed 12,000 pounds, possessed 10-foot tusks capable of goring any threat, and could charge at 20 miles per hour. Yet groups of humans weighing collectively less than 1/10 the mammoth's mass brought these giants down not through superior strength, which they utterly lacked, but through planning that spanned days, cooperation that required precise coordination between 15 to 25 hunters, understanding of mammoth behavior developed across generations, and technology that extended human capability beyond what bare hands could accomplish. It's a question that seems impossible at first consideration. How could creatures weighing 150 pounds hunt creatures weighing 12,000 pounds, a disparity of 80 to 1, without claws or fangs or natural weapons, yet succeeding regularly enough that mammoth hunting became an established survival strategy rather than desperate gamble? We'll discover the patience of tracking herds for days to understand patterns and identify vulnerable individuals, the innovation of spear throwers extending range to 150 feet and creating distance that transformed hunting from suicide into possibility, the sophistication of coordinated group tactics where each hunter played specific roles, the knowledge of mammoth anatomy revealing where strikes could reach vital organs, the strategic use of terrain that turned landscape itself into hunting advantage, and the honest truth about what made mammoth hunting successful. Not any single factor, but intelligence, cooperation, accumulated cultural knowledge, and technology all working together to overcome physical limitations that should have made such hunting impossible. If you drift off while listening, that's exactly what should happen. Consider subscribing if these stories help you find rest, and there's a Buy Me a Coffee link in the description if you'd like to support this channel. A like helps others discover these sleep stories too. Now settle in, get comfortable, and let's travel back to a time when Homo sapiens walked frozen tundra alongside the largest land animals in their world, and discover through scenes of tracking and planning and coordinated hunting how our ancestors used intelligence to accomplish what physical strength alone could never achieve, learning what it took for humans to bring down giants and what that reveals about the capabilities that define our species. The land stretches flat and white beneath gray sky, snow covering ground that rolls gently toward distant hills barely visible through the cold haze that hangs in still air, and across this expanse move shapes that appear at first like boulders displaced by some ancient force, dark masses against pale surface. But these boulders walk, their movement slow and deliberate, each step measured and purposeful, and as distance closes, the shapes resolve into forms both familiar in their basic animal structure, yet impossible in their sheer scale. Bodies that rise higher than any human could reach, even with arms extended fully overhead, covered in fur that hangs in thick curtains, swaying with each stride, dark brown and reddish tones visible against the white background. And these are woolly mammoths, creatures that stand 11 feet tall at the shoulder, measuring from the frozen ground to the peak of their humped backs, where muscle and fat create a distinctive profile, weighing somewhere between 10 and 12,000 pounds, depending on the season and the individual and the availability of food during recent months. Their massive frames built on leg bones as thick as small trees, each leg ending in feet with broad pads that distribute weight across snow, supporting bodies that could crush anything beneath them with casual ease, equipped with tusks that curve upward and forward through the air for 8 to 10 feet, ivory weapons that grow throughout the animal's life, capable of goring any predator foolish enough to approach without proper caution and planning. And beyond the tusks, there is the trunk, muscular and flexible, able to lift hundreds of pounds or delicately pluck individual grass stems, a tool for feeding and drinking and sensing and fighting, adding another dimension to the mammoth's formidable presence. These creatures possess surprising speed despite their enormous bulk, able to charge at 20 miles per hour when threatened or angered, covering ground faster than a human can run for sustained distance, their legs moving with power that shakes the earth, and when a mammoth charges, the sound alone is terrifying. A rumbling bellow combined with the thunder of feet striking ground, and anything in the path of such a charge risks being trampled or gored or swept aside by trunk or tusks. Yet despite all of this, despite the size and the weapons and the speed and the sheer physical dominance that mammoths represent in their environment, groups of Homo sapiens successfully hunt these giants. Humans who individually weigh perhaps 130 to 170 pounds, standing 5 to 6 feet tall, possessing no claws or fangs or natural armor or any physical feature that could harm a mammoth in direct confrontation, collectively representing less than 1/10 the mass of a single adult mammoth. A disparity so extreme that the very idea of humans hunting mammoths seems absurd, impossible, the product of wishful thinking rather than achievable reality, and yet it happens, not occasionally through rare luck, but regularly enough that mammoth hunting becomes an established part of human subsistence strategy in regions where these animals live. And the question of how this is possible, how creatures so small could hunt creatures so enormous, how beings without natural weapons could bring down the largest land animals in their world, unfolds not in a single answer or simple explanation, but through many strategies woven together, intelligence and cooperation and accumulated knowledge, creating possibilities that physical strength alone could never achieve, patience and planning, transforming what should be impossible into something that is merely extraordinarily difficult and dangerous, but ultimately achievable through proper preparation and execution. The relationship between human and mammoth is not one of predator and prey in the usual sense, not the relationship between wolf and deer, where natural advantages clearly favor the hunter, but rather something more complex, more dependent on intelligence than instinct, more shaped by learned behavior than by evolutionary adaptation. Because humans are not naturally equipped to hunt mammoths the way that wolves are equipped to hunt deer, there is no biological hunting package that makes mammoth predation an obvious ecological role. Instead, humans must create their hunting capability through thought and cooperation and technology, building through cultural innovation what biology never provided. And this creation, this transformation of humans into effective mammoth hunters, despite having no natural qualifications for the role, represents something fundamental about what humans are and how they interact with their world. The application of intelligence to problems that cannot be solved through physical strength, the use of cooperation to accomplish what individuals cannot achieve alone, the development of technology to extend capability beyond what bare hands can do, and the accumulation of knowledge across generations so that each new hunter doesn't start from nothing, but instead inherits understanding built up through countless previous attempts, successful and failed, each experience adding to the growing body of cultural knowledge about how to hunt the giants that share the landscape. Morning light touches the snow, and a figure moves across the white surface, walking with purpose but without apparent hurry, feet crunching through the crusted top layer where last night's freeze hardened what had been slightly softer during yesterday's warmth. Each step breaking through with a soft sound that carries in the still air. And this figure is a tracker, a human specialized through experience and training in reading landscapes, understanding animal behavior, following signs that others might miss or misinterpret, And now the tracker's eyes scan the ground ahead, not looking at the broad vista of hills and sky, but focusing on the immediate surface, reading the snow the way others might read markings carved on stone or pressed into clay, finding meaning in disturbances that reveal what passed this way and when and in what state of mind or body. And here the ground shows signs that make the tracker slow and look more carefully, impressions in snow where something massive passed, each footprint larger than a human torso. Circular depressions pressed deep, where the weight of thousands of pounds compressed the snow into denser ice, transforming loose crystalline structure into something more solid, creating marks that will persist for days unless new snow falls or wind redistributes what lies on the ground. And these tracks tell stories to those who know how to listen, the depth indicating how recently they were made, snow that has settled back into the depression suggesting several days ago, while tracks still showing sharp edges and loose snow around the margins indicating more recent passage, perhaps yesterday or even this morning depending on temperature and wind conditions. The tracker kneels beside one particularly clear print, studying the details, noting the size, which suggests a large adult, the depth, which combined with snow conditions indicates timing, the shape, which shows whether the animal was walking or running, placing feet carefully or moving with urgency. And all of this information matters because mammoth hunting succeeds through knowledge, through understanding. Not just that mammoths are present in the area, but where they are going and why and how they are moving and what state they are in, whether they feel safe and are traveling their normal routes, or whether something has disturbed them and made them wary, because wary mammoths are nearly impossible to hunt. Their senses alert, their movements unpredictable, their willingness to respond aggressively to any perceived threat much higher than when they feel comfortable in their environment. The tracks show walking, not running, regular spacing between prints indicating steady, unhurried pace, the pattern of movement suggesting animals traveling between feeding grounds rather than fleeing from danger or searching urgently for something. And this distinction, this difference between casual movement and emergency behavior, provides the tracker with crucial information about whether approaching these particular mammoths represents reasonable opportunity or wasteful danger, whether the circumstances favor an attempt or whether patience demands waiting for better conditions, because mammoth hunting is expensive in time and energy and risk, requiring days of preparation and coordination, involving danger to every hunter who participates, and attempting hunts when conditions don't favor success wastes these resources and potentially alerts the mammoths to human presence in ways that make future attempts even more difficult. The direction the tracks travel points toward a line of hills to the east, dark shapes rising against gray sky, and the tracker follows, not rushing, maintaining a pace that can be sustained for hours without exhaustion, because this is not work measured in moments or even in single days, but potentially in several days of continuous tracking, following the herd across landscape, learning their patterns, identifying vulnerable individuals, finding opportunities, and rushing burns energy that might be needed later, while also increasing chance of making mistakes, missing signs, losing the trail, so the tracker walks steadily, eyes moving between the tracks ahead and the broader landscape, noting other features that provide information about what happened here, and scattered across the white surface appear frozen masses of dung, each pile as large as what 10 horses might produce together, composed of partially digested grasses and sedges and willow leaves, the fiber structure still visible showing what vegetation the mammoths have been eating. And these piles too tell their stories, the freshness indicating how long ago they were deposited, frozen solid suggesting at least one night has passed, still retaining some moisture suggesting perhaps just one night rather than many, the amount and distribution suggesting the size of the group, one pile from one animal, but many piles scattered across an area indicating a herd of at least 15 to 20 individuals, the composition showing what food sources the mammoths are finding, which helps predict where they might move next, because mammoths require enormous amounts of vegetation daily, somewhere between 300 and 400 pounds of plant material for each animal, their massive bodies demanding constant feeding to maintain that bulk through cold that would kill smaller creatures unable to generate and retain sufficient heat. The trail leads through a shallow depression where wind has created drifts on one side while leaving the other relatively clear. And the tracker notes how the mammoth prints show the animals walked on the clear side, choosing the path of least resistance, avoiding the deeper snow where movement would require more effort. And this too is useful information because it reveals something about mammoth behavior, their preference for easier travel when no immediate threat drives them, their tendency to conserve energy when possible, and this knowledge can be used in hunting. Understanding that mammoths will generally choose certain routes over others when given the option, that their movement across landscape follows patterns shaped by practical concerns about energy expenditure and obstacle avoidance, patterns that can be anticipated and used by hunters planning how to position themselves or how to guide mammoth movement toward advantageous terrain. The tracks continue across the flat land for what must be 2 or 3 miles, the tracker following steadily, and gradually the land begins to rise slightly, the angle barely perceptible, but enough that walking becomes marginally more effortful, breath coming slightly faster, legs working slightly harder, and the tracks show the mammoths notice this change too, the spacing between prints becoming slightly shorter, indicating slower pace, the animals adjusting their speed as the terrain demanded more effort. And again, this observation adds to accumulated understanding of how mammoths move and respond to their environment, knowledge that might seem trivial in isolation, but that becomes significant when combined with dozens or hundreds of other observations, all of them together creating a mental model of mammoth behavior that allows hunters to predict and plan in ways that would be impossible without this foundation of understanding. The trail leads down into a shallow valley where trees grow more thickly, willow and birch clustered along what is probably a stream beneath the snow and ice, and here on bark appear markings that confirm the tracker is following mammoth trail, gouges where tusks scraped against wood, the distinctive paired marks showing where ivory encountered tree, torn sections where rough bark was used to scratch skin beneath thick fur, areas where mammoths rubbed to relieve itching or remove parasites, branches broken at heights no other animal in this landscape could reach, snapped sections hanging from trees 8 or 9 feet above ground. And these signs are redundant with the tracks but still valuable because they add detail to the picture of what the mammoths were doing when they passed through this valley. Not just traveling, but also pausing to interact with vegetation, scraping tusks, rubbing bodies, feeding on willow shoots, all activities suggesting they felt comfortable and unthreatened, confirming the impression from the track patterns that this herd is moving in normal patterns rather than fleeing danger or searching urgently for resources, making them potentially suitable targets if other conditions align properly. The tracker examines one tree where the gouges are particularly deep and fresh, touching the exposed wood where bark has been torn away, feeling for moisture that would indicate very recent damage, finding the wood dry and the sap crystallized, suggesting at least a day has passed. And these small determinations, these tiny pieces of information extracted from careful observation, all contribute to the growing understanding of where the herd is and where they might be going, and how much time has passed since they were in this exact location. The tracker moves through the valley following the signs, and on the far side where the land rises again toward open tundra, the trail becomes clearer, the snow shallower here where wind has swept it away, revealing patches of frozen ground and dead grass, and the mammoth tracks press into this ground, leaving marks in frost and compressed vegetation that show clearly even without snow to capture footprints. And now the tracker can see that the trail is very fresh. These marks probably made this morning or possibly even within the last few hours. The herd now close enough that continued following might soon bring them into view, and this possibility changes the approach. The tracker now moving more carefully, more quietly, avoiding movement that might be visible from distance, avoiding being silhouetted against the sky, using terrain features to maintain concealment, because the goal now is not just to follow, but to observe without being observed, to find the mammoths and watch them without alerting them to human presence, gathering information that will be used to decide whether hunting is possible, and if so, how to approach it, and which individual to target, and what terrain advantages might be used. The tracker follows the trail through hours of careful approach, and from a low rise the land ahead spreads out in broad expanse. White snow marked by darker patches where rock outcrops pierce through or where vegetation creates visual texture. And there, in the distance, perhaps a mile away, perhaps slightly more, movement catches the eye. Dark shapes against white ground. And these are the mammoths, the herd the tracker has been following since morning. And now comes the transition from tracking to observation, from following sign to watching living animals. And the tracker settles into a position with a view of the herd, partially hidden behind rocks and low shrubs, a location that provides visibility while minimizing the chance of being seen, and begins the patient work of observation, counting individuals, noting which are large adults and which are smaller, younger animals, watching for any that move with difficulty or show signs of injury or age that might make them vulnerable targets, observing how the herd organizes itself and how individuals relate to each other and what they are doing in this location and how long they might stay. And these observations will take hours, possibly extending through the rest of this day and into tomorrow, because successful mammoth hunting is not built on brief glimpses or hasty decisions, but on thorough understanding accumulated through patient watching, seeing patterns rather than individual moments, understanding behavior rather than just recording actions. The herd moves slowly across the snow, and from the observation position their patterns gradually become clear, approximately 18 animals visible, ranging from fully adult massive individuals down to younger ones, perhaps 3 or 4 years old, still large by most standards but notably smaller than the adults. And the social organization shows clearly, females and young staying close together in the center, bodies forming a protective cluster where the vulnerable young can be guarded from potential threats, while larger bulls maintain positions at the edges of the group or move somewhat separately, the largest males being more solitary by nature, joining the main herd for breeding season but otherwise maintaining some independence. And this social structure, observed and understood through hours of watching and through information passed down from previous hunters who also watched mammoth herds, provides crucial information about hunting opportunities, because the bulls at the edges, though larger and more dangerous individually, are also more accessible, not surrounded by the defensive wall of adult females that instinctively protect the young. And separation creates vulnerability, distance from the herd's collective defense, making individuals easier to approach, easier to surround, easier to target, without immediately alerting the entire group to danger. Though the flip side is that solitary bulls are often the largest and most formidable individuals, in their prime and fully capable of defending themselves, so the calculation becomes complex, balancing accessibility against individual strength. And this is where experience matters, where hunters who have participated in many mammoth hunts can assess the trade-offs and make decisions based on accumulated wisdom rather than just immediate observation. The tracker watches as one bull in particular moves apart from the others, an older individual based on several visible signs: the graying of fur around the face and shoulders, the deliberate heaviness of movements that suggests joints stiffened by age and old injuries, the way it occasionally pauses in ways that younger animals don't, catching breath or dealing with discomfort. And this individual becomes increasingly interesting as observation continues. Not because hunting it would be easy. Nothing about mammoth hunting is easy regardless of target selection, but because age brings changes that shift odds even slightly in favor of hunters, reduced speed in responding to threat, meaning the bull cannot charge as quickly or as explosively as a younger animal might, less stamina for prolonged movement, meaning it cannot flee as far or as fast if the hunt goes badly from its perspective. Perhaps accumulated injuries from decades of life in an environment where every winter brings risk of starvation, and every encounter with rivals during breeding season brings risk of tusk wounds. All factors that experienced hunters learn to recognize and consider when deciding whether to attempt a hunt at all. Because failed attempts not only waste days of preparation and expose hunters to danger without benefit, but also alert the herd and educate them. Mammoths, having excellent memories and considerable intelligence, learning to associate humans with danger if hunts are attempted carelessly, becoming more vigilant and harder to approach, their natural wariness increased by experience, making future hunting attempts in the area significantly more difficult and reducing the overall success rate over time, so the decision to attempt a hunt must balance opportunity against risk and against long-term consequences of failure. The old bull moves away from the main herd, and the tracker watches its progress across the snow, noting where it goes and what route it takes and what it does when it arrives, feeding on willow shrubs along a frozen stream, using tusks to sweep snow aside and reach vegetation beneath. And this feeding behavior reveals something about the bull's priorities and vulnerability. When animals are feeding, they are somewhat less alert to danger, attention divided between watching for threats and processing food. And the location is also significant. The frozen stream running through a shallow valley with slopes on either side, terrain that has potential for use in hunting strategy if properly utilized. Slopes that could position hunters above the bull, stream valley that might channel movement in predictable directions, willows providing some concealment for approach, all features that the tracker notes mentally, building the detailed picture that will be shared with other hunters when discussion begins about whether to attempt this hunt, and if so, how to organize it. The observation continues through afternoon, the tracker occasionally shifting position to maintain view as the herd moves, never approaching closer but adjusting to keep them visible, and gradually more details emerge, the old bull consistently staying somewhat separate, the main herd moving in patterns that suggest they will travel eastward tomorrow based on the direction they face when resting and the way they gradually drift that direction even while feeding. The overall health of the herd appearing good, with no signs of starvation or disease that might make them unpredictable in behavior. And all of this information matters. All of it contributes to the decision-making that will happen tonight when hunters gather to discuss what has been observed and what might be possible. As light begins to fade, the tracker withdraws carefully, moving away from the observation position without creating movement that might alert the mammoths even at this distance, walking back along the route used for approach. And the return journey takes several hours in gathering darkness, navigating by landmarks and by general sense of direction developed through lifelong experience moving across landscapes. And eventually the tracker arrives at camp, where fires burn low and people wait for news about what was found. And now begins the discussion that will determine whether a hunt will be attempted, and if so, when and how. multiple voices contributing observations and experience, the tracker sharing what was seen, others adding knowledge from previous hunts, from other observations, from information passed down through generations, everything coming together to build the plan that will guide any attempt, because mammoth hunting cannot be improvised, cannot be attempted casually on sudden impulse. The risks are too great, and the requirements too complex. Success depending on careful planning that takes into account every factor that can be anticipated or controlled. And this planning represents one of the fundamental elements that makes mammoth hunting possible. The ability of humans to think ahead, to imagine future scenarios, to discuss possibilities and refine strategies before committing to action. Capabilities that separate human hunting from the more instinct-driven predation of other carnivores in the environment. The discussion circles around the old bull that was observed, weighing its accessibility against its remaining strength, considering the terrain where it was feeding and whether that terrain provides sufficient advantage, talking about weather patterns and whether conditions will hold stable enough to allow a multi-day hunt without dangerous storms that could scatter the herd or endanger hunters, and gradually consensus builds, not unanimous at first, but growing as different voices work through the considerations, and the decision forms that, yes, the hunt will be attempted. The old bull is the target. The timing will be in 2 days, allowing time for additional preparation and for positioning hunters and for ensuring the herd remains in a location where the hunt can proceed. And with the decision made, the work shifts to planning details, discussing who will take which roles, where different hunters will position themselves, what signals will be used for communication during the hunt, what contingencies exist if the mammoth responds differently than expected, and these discussions go late into the night, firelight illuminating faces as people talk through scenarios and options, building shared understanding of the plan so that when the moment comes, everyone knows their role and can act in coordination even without being able to communicate directly during the hunt itself. Days pass in preparation and additional observation, different hunters taking turns watching the mammoth herd, confirming they stay in the anticipated area, noting any changes in behavior or movement patterns, and the old bull continues separating from the main herd, following patterns that make it increasingly clear that targeting this individual is the right choice. And meanwhile, in camp, preparations continue. Spear points being checked and sharpened, spear throwers being tested to ensure they function smoothly, extra spears being prepared because no one can be certain how many strikes will be needed, and having extras available prevents having to retrieve and reuse spears during the hunt, clothing being checked and adjusted because staying warm during long hours of positioning and waiting is essential. People going without food for 1 day before the hunt to sharpen senses and focus. All of these preparations being part of the ritual and practice that surrounds mammoth hunting. Knowledge developed through experience about what works and what helps and what prevents problems during the actual hunt itself. The spear throwers deserve particular attention because they represent one of the crucial technological innovations that makes mammoth hunting survivable. These devices carved from wood or antler or bone, typically 2 feet long with a hook at one end that engages the base of the spear, transforming the mechanics of throwing by extending the leverage of the human arm. And the physics is straightforward. The spear thrower effectively makes the arm longer, increasing the arc through which force is applied to the spear, and this translates into higher velocity at release, which translates into greater distance and greater penetrating force, allowing hunters to throw from distances of 150 feet or more with enough force that stone points can penetrate even the tough hide of a woolly mammoth, hide that has evolved over millennia to protect against cold and against the attacks of large predators like cave lions, hide so tough that hand-thrown spears from close range might not penetrate deeply enough to reach vital organs, but spears thrown with atlatal velocity can punch through and reach the vulnerable areas beneath. This extended range that spear throwers provide is what makes mammoth hunting survivable, creating space between human and prey that didn't exist before this technology was developed. Distance that gives multiple hunters chances to strike before the mammoth can close with any of them. Distance that prevents the mammoth from using its primary weapons, those 10-foot tusks and that 6,000-pound bulk and that 20-mile-per-hour charge. Because a mammoth that can reach a hunter can kill that hunter with ease. One swipe of trunk or tusk can break bones or rupture organs. One charge can trample a human being into pulp. But a mammoth that is 150 feet away cannot bring those weapons to bear before multiple spears arrive from multiple directions. And this distance transforms hunting from suicide into possibility, from something that might work once by pure luck into something that can be systematically attempted with reasonable expectation of success by prepared hunters using proper tactics. The spear points themselves also represent accumulated innovation, shaped from stone through careful flaking that creates sharp edges and a point capable of penetrating hide, designed with specific shapes that have been refined through generations of trial and error, longer, narrower points for penetration depth, wider barbed designs that are harder for the animal to shake loose. Each design reflecting learning about what works against animals of different sizes and types. And for mammoth hunting, the points are typically longer and narrower, prioritizing penetration over cutting width, needing to reach deep into the body to strike vital organs, because surface wounds on a mammoth, even wounds that would be serious for smaller animals, might not be sufficient to bring down such a massive creature with such enormous reserves of strength and blood. The morning arrives when conditions align for the attempt, weather clear and cold, wind minimal, which matters for throwing accuracy and for scent control, the herd confirmed to be in the anticipated location, with the old bull maintaining his pattern of separation, and the hunters rise before dawn and prepare themselves, eating a small meal to provide energy, but not so much that they feel heavy or slow, checking equipment one final time, and then they begin moving out in groups, spreading across the landscape in patterns that have been discussed and agreed upon, everyone knowing where they need to be and when they need to arrive, the coordination beginning even before any hunter comes within sight of the mammoths, because timing matters. Everyone needs to be in position before the drivers start creating movement. Otherwise, the careful plan dissolves into chaos, with mammoths running in unpredictable directions and hunters unable to coordinate their strikes effectively. The movement into position takes hours, slow, careful approach to avoid alerting the mammoths or other animals that might alarm them, staying downwind so that scent doesn't carry to the sensitive nostrils that can detect danger from remarkable distances, using terrain features for concealment, moving during times when the mammoths are distracted by feeding or resting. And this phase of the hunt requires as much discipline and patience as the actual confrontation, because hunters who rush or become careless or lose track of their assigned positions can ruin the entire attempt, alerting the prey and wasting all the preparation that has gone before. One group of hunters moves to the north of where the herd is located, positioning themselves along a low ridge where they can see the valley below, but where they won't be visible against the skyline from the mammoth's perspective. And these will be the drivers, the ones who start the movement by showing themselves and creating enough disturbance that the mammoths choose to move away, but not so much disturbance that they panic and run unpredictably, the balance being crucial, creating discomfort without creating terror, guiding movement without forcing chaos. And this role requires experience and judgment, understanding how much pressure to apply and when to back off, reading mammoth body language to see whether they are merely uncomfortable and choosing to move, or whether they are becoming genuinely alarmed and about to flee. Another group positions in the valley itself, hidden among willows and rocks near the frozen stream, And these are the primary throwers, the hunters who will make the first strikes when the old bull comes within range. Their positions chosen to provide good throwing angles toward the vulnerable areas behind the bull's shoulders, and they settle into their hiding places and wait, controlling breathing to prevent visible vapor clouds in the cold air, remaining absolutely still so that no movement alerts the mammoths that graze and rest within a few hundred feet, spears ready with points set into the hooks of their atlatls. Everything prepared for the moment when the plan either succeeds or fails. A third group positions on the far side of the valley, spread out in a loose arc that will provide additional strike positions once the hunt begins. And these hunters serve multiple functions. They can throw spears if the angle is right. They can help maintain pressure from multiple directions. And importantly, they provide safety backup. If the mammoth manages to charge toward the primary throwers and gets too close, these hunters can launch spears into the bull's flank or hindquarters to distract it and potentially save the hunters who have become the focus of the charge. Because mammoth hunting is dangerous and people can be killed if things go wrong. So having hunters positioned to cover different contingencies is not excessive caution, but reasonable preparation for dealing with an animal that can kill humans easily if it manages to close distance. All of these positions are occupied through the middle part of the morning, hunters settling into place, and now comes the waiting, the watching, the long period of enforced stillness, while the mammoths continue their normal activities below, grazing, occasionally interacting, the old bull maintaining his separation at the edge of the herd, and the hunters wait for him to move toward the valley where the hunt is planned, wait with patience developed through lifetimes of hunting, understanding that rushing creates failure, that the right moment must be allowed to develop naturally rather than being forced. The sun climbs higher, and the old bull begins moving, walking slowly away from the main herd, angling toward the valley where willows grow, and this movement has been anticipated, the pattern observed during previous days suggesting he favors this feeding area, and now the hunters tense slightly, preparing but not yet acting, waiting to see if he continues into the valley or turns aside to go somewhere else, because the plan depends on him choosing this route. And fortunately, he does continue, entering the valley at the southern end, walking with the ponderous deliberation that creatures of such size develop, each step measured, tusks swaying slightly with the motion of his head, trunk occasionally reaching down to test the ground or sample air, and he moves deeper into the valley toward the willows, and the hunters in concealment watch him come, seeing clearly now how massive he is, even for a mammoth. 11 feet at the shoulder, body extending behind that height in a bulk that must weigh close to 12,000 pounds, legs like tree trunks supporting that weight, hide thick and covered with fur that shows gray and brown and reddish tones, and watching this creature approach the human mind naturally calculates the mismatch. 160-pound human versus 12,000-pound mammoth, the disparity almost 75 to 1, and somewhere in that calculation comes the recognition that this should be impossible, that what is about to be attempted defies reasonable assessment of possibility. Yet the hunt proceeds because humans have learned that intelligence and cooperation can overcome physical disparities that seem insurmountable, that the apparently impossible becomes achievable through planning and coordination and accumulated knowledge. The bull reaches the area where the primary throwers wait hidden, now about 100 feet from the nearest hunter, and this is within range of the spear throwers, but just barely, the edge of effective distance, and the lead hunter, positioned to see the bull clearly, makes a decision based on experience and on assessment of the moment, waiting a bit longer to allow the bull to move closer, not rushing the first strike because beginning the hunt commits everyone to following through regardless of what happens next. Better to wait for optimal conditions than to start from a marginally effective position. and the bull continues moving slowly forward, now 80 feet from the nearest thrower, now 70 feet, and at this distance accuracy increases, power increases, the chance of a truly effective first strike becomes higher, and the lead hunter slowly rises from concealment, spear set into the atlatl, body positioned for throwing, and makes a bird-like chirp sound that carries to the other hidden hunters the signal that means prepare, be ready, and then the lead hunter draws back the atlatl and throws with the full force of practiced motion, arm and thrower moving together through the arc that releases the spear with tremendous velocity, and the spear flies across the cold air trailing a faint sound and strikes the old bull behind the left shoulder, the point penetrating hide and muscle, driving deep into the body toward the vital organs beneath. And the mammoth's reaction is immediate and explosive, a bellow that echoes across the landscape, a sound of pain and anger and alarm all together, and the massive body turns toward the direction from which the strike came, head lowering, tusks coming forward, preparing to charge toward the threat. And before that charge can fully develop, two more spears are already in flight from different angles, hunters who were watching for the signal and who threw immediately after seeing the first strike. And these spears hit within seconds of each other, one striking behind the right shoulder, the other hitting further back along the ribs. And the bull now has 3 spears protruding from its body, each wound bleeding, each strike adding damage to the others. And the confusion of being struck from multiple directions makes the bull hesitate, turning toward one threat, then turning toward another, trying to identify where danger is coming from. And this confusion is exactly what the strategy aims to create. Multiple strike points preventing the mammoth from focusing on any single threat, preventing it from making an effective charge in one direction, and more spears are already being prepared by hunters who threw first strikes, retrieving additional spears from the supply they brought to their positions, getting ready for the next round of throwing while other hunters are launching their first strikes, the pattern building into a rhythm of multiple hunters throwing, retrieving new spears, throwing again, maintaining continuous pressure from various directions. The old bull attempts a charge toward the nearest visible hunter, moving with surprising speed despite its size and despite the wounds it has already received, but another spear strikes from behind before the charge develops momentum, hitting the area just behind the right shoulder again, and the impact causes the bull to turn, abandoning the initial charge to address this new threat. And this is the pattern that continues. The mammoth attempting to charge first toward one hunter, then toward another, but always being hit from a different direction before it can close distance. The coordination of the hunting group preventing the mammoth from using its size and power effectively, forcing it to respond to multiple threats simultaneously, something its instincts aren't prepared to handle, because predators in this environment typically attack from one direction or perhaps 2, not from 6 or 8 different positions all around, and the confusion and frustration are visible in the mammoth's movements, the uncertainty about where to focus attention, the mounting damage making movements less coordinated, blood loss beginning to affect strength and responsiveness, even though the bull remains dangerous and capable of killing any hunter it reaches. Minutes pass, and more spears find their marks, each hunter working in the coordinated rhythm that has been practiced. Those who have thrown moving to retrieve additional spears from caches prepared earlier, while other hunters maintain pressure, ensuring that the mammoth never gets a break, never gets time to flee or to mount a sustained charge. The continuous pattern of strikes from multiple directions, keeping it confused and defensive, and the hunters themselves maintain discipline. No one approaching closer, even as the mammoth shows signs of weakening, because wounded animals are often more dangerous than healthy ones, pain and desperation making them unpredictable, and a mammoth with nothing to lose might make a suicide charge that could kill multiple hunters before being brought down. So distance is maintained, safety prioritized, the strategy continuing to rely on range rather than close engagement, intelligence over strength, patience over aggression. The old bull's charges become less committed, the turns less sharp, movements showing the fatigue and blood loss taking effect, and still the hunters continue the pattern, additional spears striking the vulnerable areas, each impact adding to the accumulated damage. And watching from their positions, the hunters can see the moment approaching when the massive animal will no longer be able to maintain its feet, can see the trembling in the legs as muscles strain to support 12,000 pounds under conditions of shock and injury, can see the way breathing has become labored, the way the trunk hangs lower than before, the head carried less high. All signs that despite its size and strength, the mammoth is reaching the limits of what its body can endure, and the hunters recognize this transition, the shift from active threat to inevitable conclusion, and they adjust their behavior accordingly, fewer spears thrown now, allowing time to do its work, watching for the moment when the bull will fall, ready to strike again if needed, but not wasting spears on an animal that is already defeated, showing a kind of respect for the prey, even in this moment of its death, acknowledging what it took to bring this giant down, understanding that the mammoth fought with all the strength and will it possessed, that there is no dishonor in being overwhelmed by coordinated intelligence when fighting alone against many. The bull's front legs buckle and it drops to its knees, massive body tilting forward, and for a moment it remains in this position, head still raised, tusks pointing upward. Then the rear legs give way and the entire 12,000 pounds rolls to its side. The impact of that much mass hitting frozen ground, sending vibrations through the earth that can be felt by hunters standing 50 feet away, snow jumping slightly from the impact, and then movement stops. The huge body now still except for the slight movements of breathing that continue for a short time and then cease. And the hunt is over, the old bull is dead, and the hunters wait a bit longer before approaching, giving time to ensure no movement remains, because caution serves survival even now when outcome seems certain. And finally they come forward from their positions, converging on the massive body, and seeing it up close the size becomes even more overwhelming, the shoulder reaching far above even the tallest hunter's head, the body extending for lengths that seem impossible, 15 feet from chest to hindquarters, tusks curving through space for their full 10-foot lengths, and standing beside this creature that they have killed, the hunters feel simultaneously the achievement and the impossibility, the recognition that they have done something that should not be possible, brought down an animal that outweighs any individual by factors of 70 or 80 to 1, and they have done it not through superior strength but through planning, cooperation, understanding, patience, technology, all the capabilities that define human beings and separate them from other predators in their environment. One hunter places a hand on the mammoth's shoulder, feeling the residual warmth through thick fur, and speaks briefly. Words of respect for the animal, acknowledgement of its strength and the difficulty of the hunt. Because this is not casual killing, not sport or recreation, but necessary subsistence obtained through great effort and considerable danger, and the mammoth deserves recognition for what it was, a magnificent creature that required the coordinated effort of 24 humans working together with all their accumulated knowledge and technology to bring down. And there is no shame in this recognition, no conflict with the necessity of hunting, only honest acknowledgement that the balance between human and mammoth is not one of dominant predator and helpless prey, but of intelligence overcoming strength through means that make the outcome uncertain until the very end. The immediate satisfaction of successful hunt gives way quickly to recognition of the enormous work that now must be done, because killing the mammoth is only the beginning. What happens in the next several days will determine whether this tremendous effort and risk translates into actual benefit for the group. whether the resources contained in this 12,000-pound body can be effectively processed and preserved before spoilage makes them unusable. And this processing represents a different kind of challenge, not danger or strategy, but simple, hard physical labor sustained over extended time. And the hunters prepare themselves mentally for this transition from the focused intensity of hunting to the sustained effort of butchering. Runners go back to main camp with news of the successful hunt, and within a few hours more people arrive, men and women and older children who were not part of the hunting group, but who are needed for processing, because what comes next requires not specialized hunting skills, but simply labor, many hands working together to dismantle this massive body, and people arrive carrying tools, stone knives and choppers, bone implements for specific tasks, bringing containers for carrying meat and hide, and they look at the dead mammoth with appreciation for what it represents. Weeks or months of food for the group, hides for clothing and shelter, bones and ivory for tools and trading, and they organize themselves for the work ahead, different groups taking responsibility for different aspects of the processing, the coordination continuing even now when the danger has passed, because efficiency matters, time matters. Spoilage is the enemy now rather than tusks and bulk. The work begins with the hide, and several experienced people position themselves around the body to begin cutting, using sharp stone knives to slice through the thick skin, working carefully because this hide represents enormous value. Hundreds of pounds of material that will provide clothing, shelter coverings, containers, cordage, and many other essential items. And removing it without damage requires skill and attention, cutting along natural lines of the body, following the grain of the hide rather than fighting against it. And the cutting proceeds slowly, the hide so thick that even sharp knives require real force to penetrate, and workers trade off when arms tire, maintaining the steady pace that will be necessary for the days ahead, because rushing causes mistakes. Blades slip and cut hide in wrong places, or cut into the hide itself, reducing its usefulness. Better to work steadily and carefully than to rush and damage valuable resources. The hide peels back gradually, revealing the fat layer beneath, inches thick across much of the body, white and dense. And this fat layer is also valuable, representing both food and fuel, calories in concentrated form, capable of being rendered into oil for lamps, mixed with other materials to create waterproofing compounds, used to preserve and soften hides during tanning, the applications many and varied. And as the hide peels away, this fat is carefully removed and collected, cut into manageable pieces that are placed into containers. Nothing wasted, because waste would be disrespectful to the animal that died, and foolish given how difficult mammoth hunting is and how valuable the resources obtained from successful hunts. Beneath the fat lies muscle, the meat that represents the primary food value of the hunt, red tissue in enormous quantities, and the butchering of this begins even while hide removal continues on other parts of the body, different groups working on different areas, coordinating to avoid interfering with each other, and the meat must be cut into pieces small enough to transport, a challenge when starting from muscle groups that might weigh hundreds of pounds each. And the cutting is methodical, following muscle boundaries where connective tissue makes separation easier, removing large sections that are then reduced to smaller pieces, each piece being moved away from the carcass to areas where it can be further processed or immediately preserved through freezing given the cold temperatures. And the cold is an advantage now, allowing meat to be stored without immediate spoilage, buying time for the processing to be done thoroughly rather than frantically. The leg bones are massive, larger than human torsos, and these present particular challenges. The meat around them must be carefully removed, the bones themselves containing marrow that represents concentrated nutrition, and eventually these bones will be broken open to extract the marrow, but that comes later. First, the meat must be dealt with. the huge quantities requiring systematic organization, and people work steadily through the morning and into afternoon, the pile of processed meat growing, various cuts and qualities being sorted and organized, some meat being set aside for immediate consumption, much more being prepared for preservation, and throughout the work there is conversation, but not excessive talking. People focusing on their tasks, maintaining the work rhythm that allows sustainable effort over extended time. The interior organs are revealed as butchering continues, massive heart that pumped blood through this enormous body, weighing perhaps 30 or 40 pounds on its own. Lungs that inflate to capacities humans can barely imagine. Liver larger than a human child. Intestines stretching for lengths that seem impossible. And these organs are removed and examined, some valued as food, others providing materials for containers or other uses. The intestines particularly valuable when cleaned and prepared properly, becoming waterproof containers or cordage material. And seeing these structures up close provides education about mammoth anatomy that will be remembered and passed on. Understanding refined each time a mammoth is successfully hunted and processed. Knowledge accumulating generation after generation about the internal landscape of these animals, where organs are located, how blood vessels run, which areas are vulnerable to spear strikes, and which are protected by bone or muscle masses too thick to penetrate effectively. And this knowledge makes future hunts more likely to succeed, the targeting becoming more precise, the understanding of where to strike becoming more refined with each opportunity to see the results of previous strikes and understand what worked and what didn't. The ribcage arches above the workers like an architectural structure, massive bones curving through space, protecting the chest cavity. And these ribs must be dealt with carefully, cut through or broken to allow access to remaining tissue inside. And the work is physically demanding, requiring strength and endurance, and people trade off frequently. No one working to exhaustion because injuries from overwork or carelessness help no one and reduce the group's overall capability. Better to maintain sustainable effort, rotating through tasks, taking breaks when needed, eating and drinking to maintain energy. This work being a marathon rather than a sprint, measured in days rather than hours. And the social aspect of the work is important too. People working together, sharing the labor, conversation maintaining connection and morale, stories being told about previous hunts, jokes being made about the size of the mammoth or the difficulty of the work, children watching and learning even if they're too young to contribute significantly to the heavy labor, absorbing the knowledge and techniques they'll use when they're older, and participating in their own mammoth hunts. Evening comes, and the work continues by firelight, multiple fires providing illumination and warmth, pushing back the cold and dark. And the scene has a timeless quality. Human figures moving around the massive carcass, cutting and carrying, the fires casting shifting light and shadow. And this could be a scene from any time across tens of thousands of years, the basic activity unchanged. Humans processing mammoth, working together to transform this enormous kill into usable resources, and the work continues late into the night, no one wanting to stop while there is still tissue exposed that might freeze overnight and become harder to work with tomorrow. Better to push through tiredness and make maximum progress while conditions allow. And finally, when people are truly exhausted, they stop and sleep, posting a watch to keep fires going and to keep scavengers away, wolves and foxes and birds gathering at respectful distance, hoping for scraps or for opportunity to steal meat. And the watch ensures nothing significant is lost overnight, human presence asserting ownership of this kill that required such effort to obtain. Morning comes and the work resumes, people stiff and sore from yesterday's labor but returning to the task. And now the processing shifts to the remaining meat and to the bones. the massive skeletal structure that supported the mammoth in life and that now will provide materials for human use, bones becoming tools, ivory becoming material for carving and for trade with distant groups who value the white material for decorative and practical purposes, and the tusks in particular represent significant value, 10 feet of ivory in each, dense material that can be carved into tools, weapons, art objects, personal decorations, all sorts of items limited only by human creativity and skill. And removing the tusks requires careful work, cutting through the tissue and bone that anchored them to the skull, preserving the full length without cracking or breaking, and this takes time, but the value justifies the effort. These tusks alone potentially worth as much in trade value as several successful deer hunts, the mammoth providing not just food and hides, but also wealth in the form of tradable goods that can be exchanged for materials or resources the group cannot obtain locally. The processing continues through second day and into third day, the pace sustainable, people taking breaks, maintaining energy and focus, and gradually the massive body is reduced to manageable pieces, meat and fat and organs processed and stored, hide rolled and tied for transport, bones cleaned and sorted by size and potential use, tusks carefully wrapped to prevent damage, and what remains is increasingly skeletal. The framework that supported all that bulk now exposed and empty, ribs standing like cathedral arches, leg bones like fallen columns, skull massive and complex with cavities that housed trunk muscles and eye sockets large enough for human fists to enter, and this skeleton will remain here, too massive to move, and eventually the scavengers will clean even this. Wolves cracking bones for marrow, humans couldn't easily extract, birds picking at remaining scraps, insects working through what's left. When spring comes, the mammoth's body returning to the ecosystem that supported it in life, feeding others as it once fed itself on the vegetation that grows here, the cycle continuing as it always has. But for now, the skeleton stands as monument to the hunt, evidence that humans passed this way and successfully hunted one of the largest land animals in their world. The transport of processed materials back to main camp happens in stages, loads carried by people walking, trips taking hours each direction, and everyone participates who is capable, carrying what they can manage, even children bearing small loads appropriate to their strength, learning through participation how the group works together, how large tasks are accomplished through collective effort, how individual contribution combines with others to achieve outcomes that no one could accomplish alone. And these lessons about cooperation are as important as the physical resources being transported, the next generation learning through doing rather than through explanation, absorbing cultural knowledge about how to be part of a community that successfully survives through coordination and shared effort. The camp will have meat for extended time from this hunt, one mammoth providing enormous calories. The meat dried and frozen will last weeks or even months, depending on temperature and how carefully it's preserved, essentially removing food scarcity as immediate concern, allowing the group to focus energy on other activities, repairing shelters, making new clothing, crafting tools, engaging in social activities that strengthen group bonds, and this security, this freedom from immediate survival pressure, comes directly from the successful mammoth hunt, the intelligence and cooperation that made it possible, creating abundance that supports human flourishing beyond mere subsistence. The knowledge of how to hunt mammoths is passed between generations through multiple pathways, young hunters participating in their first mammoth hunt, learning through direct experience, watching how experienced hunters position themselves and coordinate timing and maintain discipline during the long periods of waiting, seeing firsthand how the spear throwers extend range and how multiple strike points create confusion that prevents effective mammoth charges, experiencing the fear and excitement and exhaustion and satisfaction that come from participating in something so difficult and dangerous and important. And these experiences create memories that last lifetimes, becoming part of the personal knowledge each hunter carries forward to future hunts. But the transmission goes beyond individual experience. Stories about mammoth hunts are told and retold, not just tales of particular memorable hunts, but explanations of technique, discussions of what worked and what didn't, analyses of why certain approaches succeed while others fail, and through these stories, told around fires during long winter evenings, knowledge is shared with people who haven't yet participated in mammoth hunts, children absorbing information years before they're old enough to hunt themselves, understanding developing gradually through hearing the same stories multiple times with increasing comprehension as they mature and gain broader context for understanding the details. Teaching happens deliberately, too, experienced hunters taking younger ones aside to explain specific points, demonstrating how to use spear throwers effectively, practicing throws to develop accuracy and power, explaining mammoth anatomy and where to aim strikes for maximum effectiveness, discussing how to read mammoth body language to anticipate behavior, how to position for safety while maintaining strike capability, when to press attacks and when to withdraw and wait. All the accumulated wisdom that makes the difference between successful hunts and disastrous failures, and this teaching represents investment in future capability, ensuring that knowledge doesn't disappear when experienced hunters grow too old to participate actively, maintaining continuity of understanding across generations so that the community retains its ability to hunt mammoths successfully regardless of which specific individuals are currently capable of participating, the knowledge becoming collective property rather than individual possession, surviving beyond any particular person's lifetime, growing and refining as new experiences add to what was learned by previous generations. The practice with spear throwers begins in childhood, children playing with miniature versions, learning the basic mechanics of how the device extends throwing power, developing the muscle memory and coordination required to use the tool effectively. And this play is simultaneously recreational and educational, children enjoying the activity while unconsciously preparing for the serious work they'll do as adults. And as they grow, the practice becomes more formal. Adolescents training with full-size spear throwers, learning to throw accurately at various ranges, developing power and consistency, and this training is essential because mammoth hunting allows no room for ineffective throws. Every spear must be thrown with maximum accuracy and force. Hunters must be confident in their ability to hit vulnerable targets at distances exceeding 100 feet, and this confidence comes only through extensive practice. Thousands of throws over years of training, muscle memory developing until the motion becomes automatic, body knowing how to position and move without conscious thought, freeing mental capacity to focus on target selection and timing and coordination with other hunters rather than on basic throwing mechanics. The understanding of mammoth behavior is similarly transmitted across generations, observations made during one hunting season being shared with the group and remembered for future reference, patterns noticed by one hunter being confirmed or corrected by others until accurate understanding emerges from collective experience rather than from individual observation that might be mistaken or incomplete. And this shared knowledge base grows over time, each generation adding observations to what previous generations learned. The understanding of how mammoths respond to different situations becoming more detailed and more accurate, allowing hunting strategies to be refined, approaches adjusted based on specific circumstances rather than relying on single universal method. Flexibility, developing from deep understanding of the prey's behavior in various conditions, and this flexibility makes hunting more reliable, increases success rates, reduces danger, all benefits flowing from accumulated cultural knowledge that far exceeds what any individual could learn through personal experience alone. The selection of hunting groups reflects understanding that different individuals bring different capabilities to the effort, some people being particularly good at tracking and reading sign, others having exceptional throwing accuracy or power, some showing good judgment under pressure and making effective decisions when situations don't develop as planned, others being physically strong and capable of sustained effort. And effective hunts combine people with complementary capabilities, putting together groups where various skills are represented, where weaknesses of some individuals are covered by strengths of others, the group becoming more capable than the sum of individual abilities. And this assembly of hunting groups requires social intelligence, understanding individuals and their capabilities, reading personalities and knowing who works well together, anticipating how different people will respond under stress. All factors considered when deciding who participates in which hunts, ensuring that groups have the capability mix needed for success, and these decisions are made communally. Discussions involving multiple voices, consensus built through conversation that considers various perspectives, the social process being as important as the technical knowledge, the community's ability to work together and make collective decisions being fundamental to survival in an environment where individual capability is insufficient to meet major challenges like mammoth hunting. The spiritual or ritual aspects of mammoth hunting vary, but generally include recognition that taking a life, particularly the life of such a magnificent and formidable creature, is significant action requiring acknowledgement beyond the purely practical. Words spoken over the dead mammoth expressing respect for what it was, appreciation for the resources it provides, understanding that its death enables human survival, but that this necessity doesn't eliminate the weight of having ended its existence. And these acknowledgments serve multiple functions. They reinforce values about proper relationship with other living beings. They mark mammoth hunting as important rather than casual activity. They create psychological boundary between the careful violence of hunting and the prohibited violence of harm to community members, distinguishing legitimate killing for survival from illegitimate killing from anger or malice. And they help hunters process the difficult emotions that arise from killing, the mix of satisfaction and regret, achievement and discomfort, the reality that survival requires actions that carry moral complexity, and acknowledging this complexity rather than ignoring it helps maintain psychological health and social cohesion, prevents hunting from becoming dehumanizing, keeps participants grounded in values that extend beyond immediate survival needs. The tools created from mammoth bones and ivory represent another way that knowledge is preserved and transmitted, because creating effective tools requires understanding material properties, knowing how different bones respond to shaping techniques, which portions of which bones are suitable for different purposes, how to work ivory without cracking it, how to create sharp edges on bone implements, how to strengthen weak points or compensate for brittleness. And this knowledge is specialized and technical, developed through generations of experimentation and refinement, and it's transmitted through apprenticeship, younger people working alongside experienced tool makers, watching and helping and gradually taking on more complex tasks as their skill develops, learning through doing under guidance rather than through explanation alone, because tool making is fundamentally practical knowledge requiring tactile understanding of materials and methods that can't be fully conveyed through words. And this knowledge becomes embedded in the tools themselves, a well-made tool representing not just the skill of its maker, but the accumulated understanding of all the previous makers who developed and refined the techniques, cultural knowledge made physical in the form of functional objects that enable survival. The comparison between humans and other mammoth predators is instructive because mammoths face danger from cave lions occasionally, particularly young or sick or injured mammoths that are vulnerable. And lions hunt through stealth and sudden explosive power, getting close without being detected, then rushing to make contact before the prey can flee or mount defense, and their natural weapons, teeth and claws, are formidable, capable of inflicting terrible damage in close quarters. But even lions rarely take healthy adult mammoths because the size disparity is too great, the danger too extreme. One sweep of tusks or strike of trunk can kill a lion instantly, and lions lack ability to coordinate complex multi-individual strategies. Their hunting groups operate more through instinct than planning, their communication limited compared to human language, their ability to imagine scenarios and discuss possibilities constrained by cognitive capability that, while impressive in many ways, doesn't match human capacity for abstract thinking and detailed planning. And the result is that lions pose occasional threat to vulnerable mammoths, but don't systematically hunt them the way humans do, don't have the strategic capability to bring down healthy adults through coordinated group tactics, don't possess technology that extends their natural capabilities. And this comparison highlights what makes humans uniquely dangerous as predators despite their physical weakness: the intelligence and communication and technology and cooperation combining to create hunting capability that exceeds what any other predator in the environment can achieve. The success rate of mammoth hunting is honest. Not every attempt succeeds. Sometimes weather changes unexpectedly and forces hunts to be abandoned. Sometimes mammoths detect human presence before strikes can be made and flee, or become defensive in ways that make hunting too dangerous to continue. Sometimes initial strikes miss vulnerable areas, and the mammoth is wounded but not sufficiently damaged to bring down, and the group must decide whether to continue pursuing at significant risk or to abandon the attempt, accepting the waste of wounded animal that will likely die slowly from infection, even though humans won't benefit. And these failures teach as much as successes, each unsuccessful hunt providing information about what didn't work, what assumptions were wrong, what needs to be adjusted in future attempts. And experienced hunters remember failures vividly, using them as examples when teaching younger hunters, explaining what went wrong and why, and what should be done differently. The accumulated experience, including both success and failure, creating more complete understanding than either alone could provide. The frequency of mammoth hunting reflects its difficulty and danger. Groups might attempt mammoth hunts a few times per year. When conditions are favorable and vulnerable, individuals are identified, not dozens of times, not making it routine activity, but treating it as special undertaking, requiring extensive preparation. And between mammoth hunts, the group subsists on other prey, deer and horses and bison and small game and fish and gathered plant foods, the diet being diverse and adapted to what's available seasonally. Mammoth meat being highly valued when obtained, but not being foundation of subsistence because reliable obtaining of mammoth meat would require unacceptably high risk and effort investment. Better to hunt mammoths opportunistically when circumstances favor success than to hunt them constantly regardless of conditions. This strategic approach to hunting maximizing return on effort while minimizing risk, allowing mammoth hunting to contribute significantly to group welfare without dominating all hunting activity or exposing hunters to unnecessary danger. The amount of food one mammoth provides is substantial. 12,000 pounds total weight, translating to perhaps 6,000 or 7,000 pounds of edible meat, fat, and organs, after accounting for hide, bones, blood, digestive contents, and other non-food tissues. And 6,000 pounds of mammoth meat could feed a group of 30 people for months if properly preserved, providing not just calories but also protein, fat, vitamins, minerals, all the nutritional components needed for health, essentially guaranteeing food security for extended period from single successful hunt. And this return on effort is what makes mammoth hunting worth the considerable danger and work investment. The payoff being so large that even with modest success rates, the overall contribution to group welfare justifies the resources dedicated to hunting. And when success happens, the resulting abundance creates opportunities for activities beyond immediate survival. People having time and energy to develop art, to refine technologies, to strengthen social bonds, to teach children, to care for elderly or sick community members, all the activities that make human groups more than collections of individuals struggling separately for survival. And this social complexity and cultural richness ultimately flows from subsistence strategies that create surplus and mammoth hunting. Is one such strategy, intelligence and cooperation, creating abundance that supports flourishing. The physical demands of mammoth hunting mean that participants must be in good health and reasonable physical condition, requiring strength for throwing spears with necessary force, endurance for long periods of positioning and waiting and for processing afterward, coordination for accurate throwing under pressure, and these requirements limit who can participate effectively. Generally adults in their physical prime, though the specific age range varies by individual, some people being capable at younger ages while others participate effectively into later life, and this creates social structure around hunting, where those who participate directly are a relatively small percentage of total group, but their efforts benefit everyone, and this mutualistic arrangement, where some people do the most dangerous and demanding work, while understanding that others will support them in different ways. Cooking and preparing food, making clothing, caring for children, teaching and passing on knowledge, manufacturing tools, gathering plant foods, all the other work required for survival, represents sophisticated social organization, division of labor based on capability and circumstance, rather than everyone attempting everything. Efficiency gains from specialization, allowing group to accomplish more than would be possible if every person worked in isolation, trying to meet all their own needs directly. The processing of mammoth hide into usable material is itself a complex, multi-step process requiring specialized knowledge. The fresh hide must be cleaned of tissue and fat that clings to interior surface, then treated to prevent rotting, stretched to dry without curling or distorting, then worked to soften the stiff dried hide into flexible leather through techniques involving scraping and pounding and treating with materials that break down fiber structures, the entire process taking weeks of intermittent work, requiring specific knowledge about techniques and timing, producing hide that can be cut and sewn into clothing, shelter coverings, containers, cordage, all sorts of useful items. And this transformation of raw hide into finished leather represents value addition through human labor and knowledge, raw material becoming much more useful through processing. And the knowledge required for effective hide processing is as specialized as knowledge required for hunting, different domain of expertise but equally important to group survival. And this knowledge is transmitted through apprenticeship. Young people learning by watching and helping and gradually taking on more complex tasks. The specialized knowledge being preserved across generations through this teaching process, ensuring community retains capability to fully utilize resources obtained through successful hunts. The ivory from mammoth tusks provides material with unique properties, dense and hard yet workable with sufficient effort, taking fine detail when carved, capable of being polished to smooth, lustrous finish, resistant to decay, valuable for both functional and decorative purposes, and working ivory requires specialized tools and techniques, understanding of how material responds to different approaches. knowledge of how to avoid cracking or splitting while removing material to create desired shapes, and skilled ivory workers create items ranging from purely functional tools to decorative art objects to personal ornaments that serve social functions, signaling status or group affiliation. And these items become trade goods. Mammoth ivory being valued by groups far from regions where mammoths live, traded across considerable distances along exchange networks that connect distant communities. And this trade brings materials and goods not available locally: obsidian for sharp tools, shells for decoration, exotic materials that enhance groups' capabilities or social life, and the mammoth hunt that began with tracking and spear throwing ultimately connects through trade networks to groups hundreds of miles away, the mammoth providing not just immediate resources but also trade value that opens access to broader world of materials and connections, human social complexity, creating value chains that extend far beyond immediate survival needs. The seasonal timing of mammoth hunting affects success rates significantly, different seasons presenting different opportunities and challenges. Spring, when mammoths have been surviving on stored fat through winter and may be somewhat weakened, but are also moving with migrations and spread across landscape, making finding vulnerable individuals more difficult. Summer, when mammoths are healthiest and strongest, but also most active and wide-ranging. Fall, when they're building fat reserves for winter and are particularly large and potentially distracted during breeding season. Winter, when movement is most constrained by snow and cold, and vulnerable individuals like elderly or young or sick may struggle most visibly. But when hunting is also most difficult for humans due to weather and reduced visibility, and experienced hunters understand these seasonal trade-offs, timing hunting attempts to maximize advantage, watching for opportunities that align with favorable conditions, understanding that patience to wait for right circumstances produces better results than forcing attempts during less favorable times. This strategic patience, reflecting accumulated wisdom about how seasonal factors affect both mammoth vulnerability and human hunting capability. The archaeological evidence of mammoth hunting comes from multiple sources. Kill sites showing mammoth remains with human-made spear points embedded in bones, patterns of butchering visible in cut marks on skeletal remains, processing areas showing concentrations of bones and tools in ways that indicate organized activity, living sites containing mammoth bones modified for use as tools or as raw material for creating other items. And this physical evidence confirms what seems obvious from practical analysis, that humans successfully hunted mammoths despite enormous size disparity. The archaeological record preserving proof of human capability long after individual hunts and hunters disappeared into time, and studying these ancient kill sites provides insights into techniques used, patterns of strikes showing targeting priorities, associations of different tool types with different processing activities, evidence of fire use suggesting how meat was preserved and cooked, and this archaeological knowledge combines with understanding of animal behavior and hunting strategies and practical experiments with replicated tools to create comprehensive picture of how mammoth hunting worked, the past illuminated by combination of physical evidence and reasoned reconstruction and practical knowledge, allowing modern understanding of remarkable achievements of human ancestors who thrived in Ice Age environments through intelligence and cooperation, despite lacking physical advantages that would seem necessary for survival. The question of why humans hunted mammoths when smaller prey was available has multiple answers. Most obviously, the enormous return on successful hunt, single mammoth providing as much meat as dozens of deer or similar prey, reducing frequency of hunting needed to meet groups' food requirements. But beyond simple quantity, there are social and cultural factors. Mammoth hunting being prestigious, difficult achievement that demonstrates capability and creates status. Successful hunters gaining recognition and influence within community, the cooperative achievement strengthening social bonds between participants, the shared danger and shared success creating relationships of trust and mutual reliance that serve group cohesion beyond just the immediate hunt, and the challenge itself may be motivating. Humans being creatures who take satisfaction from accomplishing difficult things, proving capability in demanding circumstances. And mammoth hunting provides such challenges abundantly, testing intelligence, courage, endurance, cooperation, all qualities valued in human societies, and success demonstrates these qualities while failure teaches humility and respect for forces beyond human control, the activity serving educational and character-building functions beyond its subsistence value. And from these multiple perspectives, mammoth hunting makes sense, not just as survival strategy, but as cultural activity that shapes and reinforces valued human capabilities and social structures. The comparison between mammoth hunting and hunting smaller prey reveals different strategic requirements. Deer can be hunted by individuals or small groups using stalking and pursuit, the speed advantage of humans over long distances, allowing persistence hunting where prey is followed until exhausted, and weapons need only penetrate relatively thin hide to reach vital areas. The overall danger being modest because even aggressive deer poses limited threat to adult human. But mammoths cannot be hunted through persistence because they don't exhaust easily and can outpace humans in short bursts. Cannot be hunted by individuals because no individual could inflict sufficient damage before being killed, require weapons that penetrate thick hide and reach vital areas in body protected by layers of muscle and fat, pose enormous danger if they close distance with hunters, and these differences require completely different hunting strategies. Mammoth hunting, demanding coordination that deer hunting doesn't require. Technology that extends human capability beyond what body alone provides. Planning across longer time scales. Accumulated knowledge about behavior and anatomy that exceeds what's needed for smaller prey, and success depending on group coordination rather than individual capability. Essentially, mammoth hunting representing highest expression of human hunting intelligence and cooperation, requiring all capabilities developed for other hunting to be applied simultaneously at highest level with minimal margin for error. And groups that successfully hunt mammoths demonstrate their community possesses both knowledge and social organization to accomplish extraordinarily difficult tasks, capability that translates into confidence and effectiveness across other domains of survival and social life. The transmission of mammoth hunting knowledge to younger generation happens gradually, children first learning through play that mimics hunting behavior, practicing throwing at stationary targets, learning to move quietly and observe animals, absorbing stories about hunts and hearing discussions among adults about tactics and techniques, then as adolescents, beginning to participate in less dangerous roles during actual hunts, perhaps serving as observers or assistants who carry extra spears or maintain communication between distant groups of hunters, learning through watching how experienced hunters position themselves and coordinate timing and respond to unexpected mammoth behaviors, and gradually taking on more active roles as their skill and judgment develops, making first throws under supervision, participating in hunts, targeting less dangerous prey like young mammoths or females separated from herds, building experience and confidence before taking on most challenging hunts, targeting large bulls or particularly formidable individuals. This graduated introduction to mammoth hunting, allowing learning to happen relatively safely, mistakes being made in lower stakes situations where experienced hunters can compensate, successful participation-building capability without requiring young hunters to face full danger before they're ready. The educational approach being sophisticated and thoughtful, recognizing that effective training requires balancing challenge and safety, pushing people to develop capability without pushing them into situations where they're likely to fail or be seriously hurt. And this educational sophistication reflects accumulated cultural understanding of how humans learn complex, dangerous skills, knowledge that itself has been refined across generations of teaching hunters, creating educational traditions that effectively transmit crucial survival knowledge from generation to generation. The role of language in enabling mammoth hunting cannot be overstated, because without sophisticated communication, humans could not plan multi-day coordinated hunts, could not discuss and refine strategies based on observations, could not assign specific roles to different hunters, and ensure everyone understands their position and overall plan, could not share knowledge across generations through stories and instruction, could not coordinate during hunt itself, using signals that convey meaning precisely in situations where verbal communication isn't possible. And language allows all of this. Human linguistic capability, providing tool for thinking about future scenarios, discussing abstractions like hunting strategy and behavioral patterns, sharing information accumulated across lifetimes and across generations, creating shared understanding of complex plans that enables coordination of activities across space and time. And without language, mammoth hunting as practiced would be impossible. Humans would be reduced to far more primitive approaches that might occasionally succeed through luck, but could never achieve the relatively consistent success that comes from planned, coordinated hunting, supported by accumulated knowledge and strategic thinking. And in this sense, mammoth hunting serves as clear demonstration of what human language enables, cognitive and social capabilities far exceeding what any non-linguistic species achieves. And these capabilities ultimately explain how physically weak humans became dominant species across nearly every terrestrial environment. Intelligence expressed through language and materialized through technology and coordinated action, creating capability that transcends biological limitations that would otherwise constrain human possibility. The understanding of anatomy and vulnerable targeting reflects sophisticated observational knowledge developed through repeated opportunities to examine mammoth bodies during processing, seeing where organs are located, how major blood vessels run, which areas of body are protected by thick bone or muscle, and which areas offer paths for spear points to reach vital structures. And this knowledge becomes formalized through teaching. Experienced hunters explaining to younger ones where to aim strikes for maximum effectiveness, why particular targeting zones work better than others, how to recognize vulnerable areas when viewing mammoth from different angles during hunt, when ideal clean side views might not be available, and this anatomical knowledge represents genuine understanding of mammalian physiology, not just learned patterns of where to aim, but comprehension of why those targets matter. What happens internally when spear penetrates in particular location? What damage results and how that damage affects the animal's capability to continue fighting or fleeing. And this understanding makes hunting more effective, increases likelihood that strikes will produce desired results, reduces number of spears needed to bring down mammoth, thereby reducing danger exposure for hunters and making efficient use of weapon resources that take time and skill to produce. And in broader sense, this anatomical knowledge demonstrates human capacity for systematic observation and logical inference. Understanding invisible internal structures through examining dead animals and reasoning about relationships between external targeting and internal effects, essentially scientific thinking applied to survival problems, creating useful knowledge through observation and analysis rather than through trial and error alone. The social organization required for successful mammoth hunting extends beyond just the hunters themselves to include entire community, because hunters depend on others to provide food and care while they're focused on tracking and hunting, depend on tool makers to provide weapons, and on hide workers to provide appropriate clothing, depend on everyone to help process kills afterward. And this mutual dependence creates social obligation and reciprocity. Hunters who risk themselves bringing food must be supported by those who benefit from their efforts, and this reciprocity binding community together through networks of obligation and expectation, everyone contributing what they can and everyone benefiting from others' contributions. And community that maintains these reciprocal relationships effectively functions better than one where obligations are ignored or where some people fail to contribute. Natural social pressure encouraging participation and reliability because people's survival depends on others and others' survival depends on them. Interdependence, creating incentive for cooperation and for maintaining positive relationships even during conflicts or personality differences that might otherwise strain social bonds. And this social organization allowing human groups to be greater than sum of individuals, collective capability exceeding what same number of people working independently could accomplish. And this organization requires no central authority or formal structure, emerging naturally from mutual benefit and maintained through social pressure and shared values that are transmitted across generations as part of cultural knowledge. Younger people learning not just technical skills for survival, but social expectations about contribution and reciprocity and cooperation. Learning how to be functional community member, in addition to learning how to make tools or hunt animals or process hides, the social education being as crucial as technical education for maintaining groups that successfully solve problems like mammoth hunting that require coordinated effort by many people working toward shared goals. The mammoth itself possesses impressive capabilities beyond just size. Intelligence comparable to modern elephants, meaning these are thinking, feeling creatures capable of learning from experience, remembering dangerous locations or dangerous situations for years, communicating with others of their kind through vocalizations and gestures, showing emotional responses to death of herd members, caring for wounded or sick individuals, all behaviors indicating complex cognitive and emotional lives. And hunting such creatures requires acknowledging their capability while also accepting necessity of hunting them for human survival. The moral complexity of killing intelligent social creatures being real but not insurmountable. Humans understanding that their survival requires taking life, and that responsibility requiring respectful treatment of prey, never hunting carelessly or wastefully, never causing unnecessary suffering, using all parts of killed animals rather than discarding resources, acknowledging significance of death even while accepting its necessity. And this ethical framework around hunting being part of cultural knowledge transmitted across generations, teaching not just how to hunt, but how to think about hunting, how to balance human needs against respect for other lives, how to kill when necessary, while maintaining humanity and avoiding becoming cruel or callous toward suffering, and this ethical dimension of hunting, being important for maintaining social values more broadly, distinction between legitimate killing for survival and illegitimate killing from anger or malice, helping maintain internal social peace by creating clear boundaries about when taking life is acceptable and when it is forbidden. And groups that maintain these boundaries effectively have lower rates of internal violence and greater social stability. The hunting ethics thus serving both to frame proper relationship with prey species and to reinforce values that reduce violence within community itself. The technological innovation of spear thrower represents crucial breakthrough that made mammoth hunting survivable, and understanding how this innovation emerged provides insights into human creativity and problem-solving, likely someone experimenting with ways to throw farther or harder. Discovered that using stick with hook to engage spear base effectively lengthened throwing arm, increased leverage, produced more velocity, and this discovery being refined through experimentation, different lengths being tried, different shapes being tested, eventually arriving at designs that worked reliably and could be manufactured with available materials, and successful designs being copied and shared and taught to others. The innovation spreading through population and persisting across generations because it provided clear advantage over previous throwing methods. And this pattern of innovation through experiment, refinement through testing, preservation through teaching, represents how human technology develops more generally. Individuals discovering or creating something new, testing and refining it, demonstrating its value to others who adopt it, eventually becoming standard part of cultural toolkit used by everyone in group and transmitted to following generations as established practice rather than recent innovation. And over time, many innovations accumulate, each one adding capability. The cumulative effect being dramatic, even though individual innovations might seem modest, and spear thrower being perfect example. Simple device that anyone can understand once shown, not requiring complex manufacture or rare materials, yet providing enormous increase in hunting capability, making possible what was previously impossible, and this multiplication of effectiveness through technology being fundamental human pattern, compensating for biological limitations through tools that extend capability, and this technological approach to problems being made possible by human intelligence and by social learning that allows innovations to spread and persist rather than being lost when individual innovators die. Culture preserving useful knowledge across generations in ways that allow continuous accumulation of capability. Each generation inheriting technologies developed by ancestors and potentially adding their own innovations, creating ever-growing toolkit of solutions to survival challenges. The final recognition that emerges from examining mammoth hunting is that humans succeeded not through any single factor, but through combination of many capabilities, all working together. Intelligence, allowing planning and learning from experience; language, allowing communication of complex ideas and coordination of activities; social organization, allowing cooperation on scales that no other predator achieves; technology, extending physical capabilities through tools; cultural knowledge, preserving useful information across generations; patience, allowing long preparation and willingness to wait for favorable opportunities; courage, enabling people to face danger when necessary, and all of these working together creating hunting capability far exceeding what physical strength or natural weapons alone would provide, this being the essential human pattern, solving problems through thinking rather than through physical force, through cooperation rather than individual action, through accumulated knowledge rather than instinctive behavior, through technology rather than biological adaptation. And this pattern allowing humans to thrive in environments ranging from Arctic to tropical, to take prey ranging from small fish to enormous mammoths, to adapt to new challenges and new circumstances with speed that biological evolution could never match. Cultural evolution operating on timescales of generations or even years rather than millennia, required for significant biological change, and this flexibility and adaptability ultimately explaining how one species with modest physical capabilities came to occupy nearly every terrestrial environment and to become dominant predator wherever it lived, not through being strongest or fastest or best armed by nature, but through being smartest and most cooperative and most capable of learning and teaching and accumulating knowledge across generations, mammoth hunting being clear demonstration of these capabilities, physical weakness overcome completely by intelligent cooperation. 12,000-pound animal brought down by groups of humans weighing collectively perhaps 2 to 3,000 pounds. Impossible made routine through application of human cognitive and social capabilities working together in service of survival. And so the hunt ends, the impossible made possible through patience and planning, through understanding passed down across generations, through cooperation that transformed individuals into something far more capable than any could be alone. The mammoth provided not just meat and hide and bone, but proof of what human intelligence could achieve when applied with discipline and coordination. Small beings bringing down giants, not through matching their strength, but through outthinking their defenses. And in this, we see the pattern that would carry Homo sapiens across the entire world, adapting to every environment, solving problems that should have been insurmountable, thriving where other species could merely survive. If you're still listening, thank you for traveling back with us tonight to walk alongside our ancestors. If this story helped quiet your mind or ease you toward rest, consider subscribing to Sapiens Sleep Stories. We explore many aspects of Homo sapiens' world, how they survived brutal ice age winters in shelters they built with their own hands, how they created the first art deep in caves by firelight, how they learned to read landscapes and find resources invisible to untrained eyes, how they built the social bonds and knowledge systems that carried them through challenges we can barely imagine. Each story is designed to inform gently while helping you find the rest you need. A-Like helps others discover these stories when they're searching for calm. And if you'd like to support the channel, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. Rest well tonight. Let the image of humans and mammoths sharing ancient tundra drift through your mind as you fall asleep. And know that the intelligence and cooperation that made mammoth hunting possible flows through time to reach you here, thousands of generations later, part of the inheritance that makes us human. Sleep well.